Thanks very much, Di. I congratulate Di on her technology expertise and putting that PowerPoint together, because you'll note that mine doesn't look like that and everything will come up on one slide. Those of you who have difficulty with your eyesight will notice that I couldn't even adjust the print on it. So I do apologise for that, but you do at least have a handout. I also knew that in the time frame there wouldn't be enough time to cover some of the aspects deeply around the one of the projects, and so I have given you a handout or a couple of handouts there, so that you will have a bit more information that we aren't able to cover here, and hopefully that will cover some of the questions. It's a real pleasure to be able to... sorry, Di, I've lost that. Is that it? It's a real pleasure to be able to talk about the Toukley case study, because I have worked closely with that school for some time, and putting parents and students at the centre of school life is definitely something that they have come to do and work towards still really well. So as we move through this, the aspects that Di covered around, you know, what they wanted and what they found in the case studies will show up throughout this, so I won't necessarily go deeply into them. I think you'll recognise them as the aspects Di's talked about. But we'll have a look at the school context, the key parental engagement strategies the school's employed, the project making educational goals sustainable, the critical success factors, the issues and challenges that they faced then, the progress and outcomes, and the sustainability, I guess, around, you know, what they've done. And the technology, I hope it doesn't fail me. Okay, there we go. So in terms of the school context, Toukley public school is located on the central coast of New South Wales. It has around 580 students. It has funding from the Priority Schools program in New South Wales to improve literacy, numeracy and engagement. And it has Smarter Schools National Partnership for low SES school communities in that initiative to transform the way that schooling takes place. The school's often had 3 generations of the families through the school, and their homeschool interactions were usually one way, as they were, you know, when my children started school, you were just invited onto the premises to work in a canteen, and, you know, someone would tap you on the head, say thank you very much and send you home again. So very, very similar up until about 4 or 5 years ago. The families did work in those volunteering capacities. There was a small core group of parents that always came and took part in any of the activities offered. The school generally tended to think, as a lot of low SES school communities do, that the parents were uninterested, not wanting to support their children, stayed away from the school in droves. But in 2006, even the core group of parents were reducing, and the school really had to take a look at the way that it was engaging with families, and had come to the conclusion that they had to do less of doing it to parents and community and inviting more feedback around that. The principal and the executive decided that they would take a parent-centred approach to school and family relationships, and that did result in some significant changes over time. They wanted to look at the parents being active partners in their child's learning at home, and moving slightly away from the thought initially of parents having to be on the school grounds to actually be engaged or involved in their child's learning. And they were looking at how they could build the parental capacity around their roles as co-educators, parents, and also participants in the workforce, because there were a lot of unemployed people in the community, so how they could support families around that. So at first they tried to encourage the parents to come in and work in the school, in the classroom, and, you know, extolling the benefits of that to the parents. But because their own child often wasn't involved in that and wasn't necessarily getting the direct benefit, parents very much saw this as meeting the school's needs rather than the school meeting theirs or their child's needs. So when that didn't work, they then went to the parents and asked them for suggestions about what they could do differently and how the school could actually fit into their lives. And I don't imagine, I didn't talk this through deeply with Narelle, but I don't imagine the parents responded immediately to that. I think they probably had a small core-ish group of parents that initially responded. But from those discussions, the school then provided a much more open kind of parent information night with the children actually involved in it, holding a barbecue at the end of it with the teachers, and there were around 500 parents and students attended. So that was a pretty good response, which told them that they were sort of heading down the right path. So they began to, the staff and the families then began to drive a new parent-centred approach together. The focus became on how the school could support the parents in learning at home to support their child and their own learning, putting the parents rather than the school at the centre of the partnership effort and building the parental capacity and creating a culture of high expectations. It was interesting, though, that culture of high expectations was kind of still one way. It was, that the teachers wanted to build in the parents a culture of high expectations of their students, their children. It didn't actually occur to them at that time that the teachers were the ones who actually needed to rebuild their culture of expectations around the parent and community engagement as well. So you'll see as we go through how some of that changed. So parents then were invited to contribute and share ideas, give information about their own children, and to have those needs heard and respected and acted upon wherever it was possible. So families began to actually take ownership of the way things began to run, and that resulted in a fair increase in the parental engagement in learning. So the school then went on to look at providing training for parents, particularly around technology and things like Moodle, so parents who had internet access at home, and a vast majority of them did have internet access, so that they were able to access work that their children had done at school via Moodle, and they were trained in that process. The positive parenting programs that were run at the school previously hadn't had a great number of parents staying on beyond the initial couple of sessions, but the parents began to stay and complete the courses. TAFE Work Ready sessions were run at the school for the unemployed. The Aboriginal Advisory Committee was enhanced quite considerably as more and more parents saw the genuine desire for partnership. The school employed a community support officer who liaises with the community and started to build a lot more of the interagency links for them, so local councils, Chamber of Commerce, the Indigenous organisations, government agencies that they previously hadn't thought to link with. So that community support officer was very important in doing that. And then promoting a culture of high expectations for the students and parents, which was integral to that strategy. But the teachers have and the staff had said that one program, Making Educational Goals Sustainable, had been credited as having a profound and positive effect on the parent and students' views of the schooling and the possibilities for the future. The staff very much felt that this program, Making Educational Goals Sustainable, which we fondly call MEGS, has had that effect on parents participating in their children's learning. It's credited by the principal and the executive teachers as the turning point of the school's relationships with, beginning with Year 6 parents, and then over the 4 years. It's about 12 months since the case study was finished, so it's around 4 years now, where it has really built that capacity for the families and the teachers to engage to support student learning outcomes. The program is an engagement, attendance and retention strategy for the Hunter Central Coast area of New South Wales, to raise student and family awareness of tertiary education, to raise aspirations of students to participate in tertiary education, and to raise student educational attainment to a level that allows participation in tertiary education. So you'll see that that actually responds to some of what you've heard this morning, and this is actually the practice of some of that. I've given you the handout. I'll just give you a kind of brief overview in terms of the parents and students go together to experience a range of activities that target family understandings, perceptions and misconceptions around tertiary education. For instance, only smart, rich people go to university, and even TAFE. It's not for me, I'm dumb, I'm poor, and that's not in our family, we don't do that. So it involves between years 6 to 8, they have tertiary visits with their family, and in fact the project in many ways actually targets the parent, because if the child goes to the visits and comes home and says, gee, I had a great day today, I went to university, and they're like, oh, what do you want to go there for? It's really dumb, that's not where we go, that's not... And so the conversation stops. But when the parent comes along for that visit and is with the child, their own perceptions and understandings around that are dramatically altered, and I mean that sincerely, having been with around 4,000 parents now across those 4 years, 4,000 students, and around a bit over 3,000 parents. I could probably name on one hand the number of people that weren't altered or had their ideas changed. So they go on the tertiary visit in Year 6, they go on another one in Year 7, so it might be TAFE one year, university the next. They have real game career education implemented in the school curriculum, so around stage 3. They also in Tukley School have it in stage 2. It is then built on in the high school as a partnership with the primary. They have parent-student workshops where we say to parents, you need to help, your child's got to be more organised, they're not getting their act together and so on. We have parent-student workshops where they come together, they look at their timetable, the things they do outside of school as well as in school. They look at time management, organisation and prioritising tasks and setting goals. And the parent hears the same thing as the child, so there's a lot of modelling guided work that goes on, and the parents are really responding to that. Skill and career information sessions, and in Year 8 with that project they go to, in high school, to a defence or an industry setting. The purpose is to build an experience around future options, educational requirements. The destination for those students is their own individual choice, but the choice becomes informed by knowing the available options at an early enough stage to be able to think about, that's what I might want to do one day, that's where I want to go, what do I need to do to get there? And the teachers being able to build on that in the classroom. So the visits themselves are only the catalyst to develop a new conversation. It's what happens in the classrooms and how the parents and the teachers then work together around understanding what those child's goals around their own skills might be. The success of that strategy absolutely came from making personal approaches to parents. So telephone calls, emails, face-to-face has proved to be the most successful strategy. Personal contact supported by an open door policy that encourages parents to come along to the classrooms, look at what they're doing, to participate in the real game activities, and to contact the teachers at any time. And the parental capacity building in that to support their child is very important. The changing perceptions, I won't read those quotes for you can read them for yourself, but absolutely critical. What the parents are telling us was, it's just wonderful. And I've just put average quotes there. I didn't want to put, the U-Butte fantastic, or the ones that were, there were only a couple that were maybe negative, and they were about, I didn't want to see the library, or I had to walk too far today. You can read them and they're average, but 100% attendance by parents on these visits after the first year. And that came as a result of the teachers. Now, when I say 100%, one parent may not have been able to go, but they would organise for another parent to support their child. Every child was supported by a significant person to attend those visits and to know they had someone to talk to when they came home. Teachers were reluctant to go on the tertiary visits with families. They really couldn't envisage a day out with it was difficult enough with the kids, let alone add the parents into the mix. Oh my God. So that was a real difficulty to start off with. But having to make that contact with the parents by phone as well was just like, we haven't got time for this. This is just not our job. We're here to educate children, not parents. So it was quite difficult. But the they were just incredibly amazed at the response, that the positive invitation in itself, when a parent-teacher is ringing you for something really positive as opposed to a behaviour issue, that made a big difference to the parents. They were like, oh, okay, and responded to that. It was a very pleasant and easy experience. There were very few behaviour problems. Okay, I'm on to time. So I won't go on with that story. We'll move on to the critical success factors. Absolutely strong leadership was, principal leadership ensured that cultural change. It was very difficult with those teachers, and the principal had to really work through some issues and stay very strong in the process to make sure that the teachers stayed true to it. By the second year, we didn't have too much work to do around that with the teachers. They were literally on board, enthusiastic and then prepared to extend themselves. The critical factor around it is it was very costly, and they are now working with the university to do that in a way that doesn't cost quite so much money. The community support officer is obviously very important in getting those families on board, and the teacher enthusiasm has made a difference. I've already... How much time have I got, Di? Oh, I thought you were telling me to hurry up. Oh, yeah, right, okay. So we'll move on to these. The barriers to the engagement were really... The most critical thing was the reluctance by teachers to actually engage in this initially, and to talk with families and to commit to the philosophy of a parent-student-centred approach. They understood the student-centred approach, but it took quite a lot of talk around the research and so on to get them to engage. The extra time that it added to their job was an issue. As I said, working with parents was an add-on. The lack of adequate facilities for parents to be able to have workshops and engage in activities was an issue. And sustainability of the funding was an issue. Engaging with families differently required that funding. But one of the ways that, in terms of the resourcing, there's an awareness that there always needs to be funding and a driver within the school, and what happens around that if people move on. So the school kind of have looked at that as being the families being the most important resource that they have, that the principals move on, the teachers move on. How are they going to ensure that these things remain embedded in the culture? And it really is about making sure that the families are aware of what the benefits and gains are of being involved and how they can sustain that culture beyond any staff movements. So they work from the belief that parents do love their children and want the best for them, and focusing on communicating with the parents how important they are. Let's move on to that. So the progress and outcomes of the project were really a lot more gradual than dramatic. Over 4 years, they see that it's a 6-year journey to change that culture. They've kept a building that was earmarked for removal for the parents to be able to meet in. There's evidence of increased parental engagement and workshops that parents have completed training in SLSO training. Parents who'd never been in the workforce or trained in any aspect have actually engaged in this and worked. You'll see in those handouts the skill continuum, that the career and skill continuum that the teachers then went on to put together themselves. They're now driving the community engagement. They actually went out of their way to talk to the other schools in the LMG. There's about local management group of schools, there's about 6 schools in that, 2 high schools, 4 primaries, and they organised for all of those teachers to come together to put together a continuum that ensured families are engaged from preschool to year 12 in skill and then career development, and making sure that there is a focus on what are the students' skills, what will they, how will they build them, and that the parents are involved every step of the way. So as parents ask for support, they're given that support. The culture of high expectations, as I've said to you, the culture has already changed in the school, and there's no doubt that it will continue. However, it's like anything. While the transformation has been completed, it is going to be dependent in many ways on the school community and how they do embed that in the professional development for staff of all of the schools in that surrounding community to change the whole culture of the whole community. But they have engaged their wider community as a result of reaching out and have interagency support for the students that they've not really had previously. They've used the government funding that they've got to the best use in order to engage with families and community for student outcomes, not for warm, fuzzy relationships. But how do we do this better to make sure these kids receive what they need? It's had a positive impact, as you can see, on homeschool relationships, and it's raised expectations and aspirations for parents and teachers. The biggest effect, as I said previously, is actually on the teachers, on the staff in the school. It's them that have changed. I don't know that they're 100% aware that it's actually them that's changed. The approach has made it possible for families and students to be a part of the school, and over those 4 years, the difference between walking into the school 4 years ago and walking in now is vastly different. So I'm always available if you know, over the next 2 days, if you have any questions around the project or the continuum or Tukley School, and thank you very much for listening.